and then focus on what brings meaning and purpose intrinsically to your life. What am I talking about? I'm talking about those moments when you do things and you feel this is what I want to be about, and then build habits around that.
Welcome to the Most Days Show. The mission of Most Days is to measurably increase quality of life globally by helping people change their habits. This show is devoted to understanding how change happens. Today, we speak with Dr. Steve Hayes about finding peace of mind and acceptance and commitment therapy. Dr. Hayes is an Emeritus Professor of Psychology at the University of Nevada, Reno, and President of the Institute for Better Health. His pioneering work in developing contextual behavioral science led to the creation of acceptance and commitment therapy, also known as ACT. Celebrated with numerous awards, including the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies and the Impact of Science on Application Award from the Society for the Advancement of Behavior Analysis, Dr. Hayes' contributions are profound. With 47 books and nearly 700 scientific articles, he stands as one of the most cited psychologists globally. In my view, Dr. Hayes' work with acceptance and commitment therapy is among the most groundbreaking in behavioral psychology over the past 30 years. ACT offers a simple yet effective framework to reduce suffering and allow people to live full, engaged lives. I'm honored to have him as a guest today and hope you find this discussion as helpful as I did. Dr. Steve Hayes, welcome to the show.
I'm really happy to be here with you.
Well, I'm honored to have you. I think, you probably won't like the way that I describe this, but I've often said about you that your work in acceptance and commitment therapy, it deserves, a Nobel Prize. I mean, it's, you've really done amazing work, and I know you don't like to take all of the credit, and there's a huge group of people, et cetera, but I think you've had a massive impact on my own life, and the work you've done is amazing. So I'll just start with a thank you for the role you've played, however you might describe that.
Yeah, well, I like leading from behind, not in front, but I'm at an age where I have to do a little bit of it out there, but it's really a large community. The way I said is I lit a match and a whole bunch of people brought wood, and then there was a bonfire. So I didn't bring the wood, but it's pretty cool that it's spread around the world.
Yeah, it's been a really beautiful bonfire. So how do you describe your career and your work? I mean, when somebody says, hey, what do you do? What is the short version? How do you describe yourself?
If it's a generic question like that, I say I'm a clinical psychologist who's interested in language and cognition, how we think and why we think that way and how it changes our interaction with the world. But if I'm given a little more time, I say I spent 40 years trying to hack the human mind and get to the smallest set of things that do the most good to the most people.
Oh, that's good. I love that. And then will you share a little bit? I mean, there's a personal connection to the work that has driven you related to your own panic attack and kind of dealing with panic disorder. How can you describe that and how impactful it was on the trajectory of the work that you ended up doing?
Yeah, it was hugely impactful, but it was kind of hidden even from my students and so forth, because panic isn't something you go out when you're in the middle of it and say, oh, I've got a panic disorder. That's not your normal response. And I was trying to kind of hack the human mind even before, but I didn't have an angle on it until life turned me upside down and shook me hard and threw me into the deep end of the pool. And after 3 years of spinning into the hell of panic disorder, I hit bottom. And I tell that story on a TEDx talk that's been looked at almost 1 million times by folks out there. You can find it easily. And that was when I was deciding I'm going to step forward and really tell about the story of origin, but with a book called The Liberated Mind. But what happened was when I did all the logical, reasonable, sensible things that I knew how to do from evidence-based therapy and the stuff that I was told was supposed to work, when I had my first panic attack, I built it out into a panic disorder, stupidly, but humanly. I did the logical, reasonable, sensible, pathological things. You run from it, you hide from it, you try to not let other people see it. And it wasn't until I hit enough bottom that I could that I suddenly, in kind of a moment of desperation when I have no other way out, thinking I'm having a heart attack in the middle of the night when I'm just having a panic attack. That happened even while I was asleep. It was getting that ingrained, that I realized I would never find a way out, but I could find a way in. And that's changed my life. And then I've spent 20 years trying to figure that out enough that I felt confident in stepping forward with the technology and wrote a book after 20 years of development with my team. And it became quite successful. And then a self-help book, which shook the world because Time wrote a 5-page story about it and suddenly became the best-selling self-help book. And so here I am 20 years after that with ACT around the world and being deployed in the Ukraine by the World Health Organization. It just was a story that really came out of my own human suffering and not knowing what to do.
Yeah. And then how much of the acceptance piece of acceptance and commitment therapy comes out of your own rock bottom moment? It seems that at the bottom, you have this moment of defiance, of acceptance. And that's so powerful. I had a friend who was asking me recently, hey, I'm waking up in the middle of the night and I'm really struggling with it. And I was talking to him about insomnia. And, a bunch of it is just being really worried that you're waking up in the middle of the night and fighting that and pushing against that. And maybe if you just say, oh, it's fine, I'll be fine, maybe that'll be a little bit easier. And that's a very simple piece of advice. But I think it is this notion of acceptance and not running away is really powerful. And so how much of the acceptance portion of ACT came out of your own desperation and acceptance in that rock bottom moment?
Yeah, I was working on language and cognition and trying to figure it out from kind of a behavioral point of view. And we were working on undermining the domination of literal rules in your head. But the panic disorder brought me into a place where that's not enough. You've got to open up to your own emotions from this more spiritual point of view, and then focus on what's important or brings meaning and purpose in your life. And so that part of it, which then took what we were doing on how to step back and watch your mind, then connected up to and use that to go into your body, into your emotions, and then look around at where you are from this more spiritual point of view, the person behind your eyes point of view. And when you've done all that, you show up. And then you ask the question, well, okay, now that I'm here, what am I up to? And then you turn towards what brings meaning and purpose in your life. So the wholeness of the model that's inside ACT has been so empirically validated now that people who really don't like ACT are saying, yeah, but that model explains what I do. So it's pretty cool to watch that happen. And it would not have happened without my own suffering. There's no freaking way that I would have known that what I really need to do is to feel anxious as it is, not as what it says it is. Who would do such a crazy thing? Well, a lot of people do. I mean, just look at folks who've had transformational experiences, and they're often spiritual, and they often involve going in instead of out. But this organ between our ears doesn't get it because it's a problem-solving organ, and it just wants to get out, make it better, which makes it worse. So insomnia is a perfect example, isn't it? Everybody knows those moments. Yeah, but if you really dig in and you really, really, really have to go to sleep and you're really, guess what you get?
Yeah, I tell my daughter, she's 7, and she's a night owl, and then she ends up, sleeping in. I can already tell. And so I'll go check on her and say, Dad, I can't go to sleep. And I always tell her, the best way to go to sleep is actually to try not to. I bet if you just try to keep your eyes open and try not to go to sleep, just lay in your bed, that's the best way. Because I can tell she's fighting, I want to go to sleep. I need to go to sleep. And then that's working against her.
The only problem with paradox, and early on, we were fascinated and wrote articles about it, did some studies about it, is that then the mind does this. It says, okay, I've got another way of making that happen. I'll just pretend that I really don't want to have it happen. Well, then it's gone. With sexual arousal stuff, you're afraid of losing an erection, the least arousing thing that's on the planet. Guess what you get? Because it's the least arousing thing on the planet. Yeah, but real paradox, like I want you to, not do anything sexual and blah, 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 blah. And people, suddenly they're horny and they're able to, but then the mind says, yeah, I've got a new tool. You're right back in it. So the safer long-term, it's fine with your daughter, is to learn for insomnia. Example, do nothing. How do you learn to do nothing? Deliberately. Well, if you do it deliberately, that's doing something. You see how hard it is? It's because we're riding the back of a tiger here. We invented language maybe 250,000 years ago, maybe 22 million years ago, but it's in that range. It's not 10 million years ago. And it's certainly not what's in the middle part of your brain, which is massively learning by experience, which is 500 million years old. So you got these really new things, what you and I are doing right now, sitting on top of like a big parasite brain systems that are 500 to 1,000 times older. And it's a train wreck until you learn how to manage it.
So in the insomnia example, so what you're saying is, look, the paradoxical thinking, which is, okay, I'm going to try to stay up and that's the way I'll fall asleep, that the brain catches on to that. And there's a little moment of, I see what you're doing here. And then you've canceled the whole thing out. And so we don't want to freak out about not sleeping and try our hardest to sleep. That's not going to help. We also, the paradoxical, all right, I'm going to try to stay up and that's how I'll fall asleep. We're not tricking our brains there. And so what you're saying is do nothing. So what does that mean in practice? That's that's what we're going to talk about. That's where all the devil's in the details.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, but what part of you just asked, can you explain that? Exactly how do I do that? Well, of course, it's the very part of your brain that we need to put a leash on. It's not the whole of you. You actually know. In fact, it's not even the whole of our judgment system. I mean, you know how to observe and describe a sunset without trying to change it. You say, wow, that's sometimes it stops there. So bring a wow mentality to insomnia. Then you say, how pink? But you don't say, God, if it had a little more blue and it was shaped like this, or, it would completely destroy the experience. With insomnia, you can creep up on the skills that allow you to learn to do nothing. But I'll tell you one thing that I learned some time ago that really helps. If you actually put your brain in a place where for 1 to 2 minutes long, you simply are not engaging in anything, including the thoughtful effort to not engage in anything. It's sort of like listening for the space in between notes, or looking at the space in between thoughts. Even if you're thinking a lot, when you look, there's a little gap in between the thoughts. That's nothing. Expand that gap out to just a minute or two, you're asleep. Now, if you're monitoring, has it been a minute? No, you're putting stuff in the gap too. Don't even listen to me, as a matter of fact. It's paradox. Because you can see that any rule I give you, you will apply actively at a rule, and that's going to keep you awake. You're going to figure out how to go to sleep, which will wake you up. You'll remind yourself how important it is. But you do know how to simply do nothing because it's happening all the time. Slow it down. Watch your mind. That's why mindfulness has helped with insomnia. What do you do with mindfulness? Nothing. The old joke with mindfulness training where you just sit, for example, and you're watching the breath maybe, or you can watch the space in between the breaths. That's a nothing, right? And somebody wanting to have that experience says, okay, how long is it going to take before I really get it? And the monk says, well, that'll take 6 months or a year of practice. And you say, well, what if I work really hard? And how long will it take? He said, well, that'll take 20 years. So we do have experience in our lives of letting go. We call it words like peace or relaxation or sleep. So when you're tired, your body will, we got millions and millions of years of evolution, and look around you. Babies don't have trouble, if they're comfortable. Dogs don't have trouble. Cats don't, if you're not hungry, they go to sleep.
And how much of this is about finding, for me, my own I've struggled with sleep for a long time. My own technique, I would describe as I'm apathetic about it, which is incredibly helpful. If I wake up in the night, I'm like, I might go back to sleep. I might not, who cares? And it doesn't really matter. It's fine. And then I tend to fall asleep quickly. It's when I really care, I really need to fall back asleep, that the whole thing unravels. And this apathy has been incredibly helpful for me. I might use the term surrender. I think that somebody like you probably doesn't love the term surrender and apathy, but how much of it's similar?
Yeah, well, if you want to simplify the whole psychological flexibility space, then all these processes are relevant to what we're talking about. Learn how to be more open, more aware, and more actively engaged in life. What you're saying is active engagement, which is usually connected to values and things of importance, can easily turn into kind of a problem-solving thing. I've got this to do. It's important. So then I need to do something to get there. So what you're doing is you're pulling the plug and you're basically engaging in I don't give an F. And so that really undermines the command and structures to the brain to figure it out, to solve the problem. No, it's something more like apathy, boredom, surrender, letting go. It's kind of a healthy form of giving up. We don't have good words for it, but it's in that space. And so you're coming at it from that end, which I think is really cool and helpful. You can come up in the kind of just being place where you settle into that witnessing, noticing part of you, and you simply surrender to awareness, and then even not even being aware that you're aware, and then sleep happens. You can pull the plug on, the rules that come up and the emotions that come up. I have to, I must have. Oh my, what should I? Okay. I mean, you may have in the background a little of a television that's on or a hum of an air conditioner, and you still go to sleep. Can you just adopt the same mentality with your thoughts and the ebb and flow of your twitches and itches and emotions? Yeah, you can do that too. So open, aware, actively engaged, any one of those can give you route into the core, which is being here as a whole person. In the case of insomnia, letting go, surrendering, showing up, being bored. I don't know, you can talk about it different ways.
You've developed a model of human suffering, and then there's a corresponding model of prosperity. Can we start? I mean, what is your model of human suffering?
Well, you could say it just logically, closed, unaware, and not engaged. And ironically, when you ask people metaphorically, do they know about this? They do. Everybody, every single person, listen to me, knows this. I can prove it to you in 30 seconds. Take something that you're struggling with, blah, 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 blah. Now put your body in a shape, just like you did when you were a kid, when you were playing statues, and freeze at the point at which your body expresses you at your worst when dealing with that issue, so that from the outside, people might even understand it if they saw your body. Now look and it's there. You at your best when dealing with the same issue. Don't change the issue. Now take a snapshot of this too and score it. Here's what you're going to find. We've done this. We just grab strangers, say, here, think of an issue, don't tell us what it is. You're at your worst, you're at your best. Snapshot. Then we rate them. At your best, you're open, aware, and ready for engagement. At your worst, you're closed, unaware, and not ready for engagement. What do you mean? Well, at your worst, your head comes down, your eyes close, your arm and hands go in, you bend at the waist, you assume a fetal position, you fall to the floor, your teeth are clenched, your fists are clenched, your jaw is clenched. At your best, your head comes up, your eyes opens up, your arms and hands go out, you might even stand up. Look, the mind doesn't get it. It doesn't know how to do it. You do. So can you take those skills that you'd apply to a sunset, or that you find just by trial and error learning, even when you're dealing with the problems you're dealing with, and now not given the problem-solving brain the directions, but the whole person the directions of how metaphorically do I put the skills that would move me into, metaphorically, this best posture with that. And so in flexibility, I can give you a spin around and put words to it. Flexibility, I can do that too, and I will if you ask me again. But before I do that, I wanted to say this to everybody listening. You already know what I'm going to say. You just don't know that you know it.
And so, so there, it's the okay. I'm in some fetal position. I'm very tight. I'm clenched up when I'm at my worst, and then when I'm at my best, I don't know. There's some power pose. I'm opened up.
Yeah,
I'm out of that fetal position. And what you're saying is that the connection between that and the psychological equivalent, the in your head equivalent, can be helpful. And so we're looking for feelings and words escape us.
exactly. So like, okay, so the inflexibility model, you are emotionally avoidant or clinging, and you are entangled in your thoughts. Your attention in the present moment is rigid. It gets jerked to the past or future, or it sticks on something and can't move, or it can't stay on anything because blah, blah, blah. You're adopting that from the story that you tell about who you are. I'm like this, I'm like that. And almost every sentence is a lie because you're not always like that. You're not always like this, even if it's sweet. Oh, I'm so loving all the time, you big liar. Of course you're not. Oh, I'm the worst of the worst. Really? All the time? No. And you're waiting to somehow be motivated by something that will get your ass moving, or you're compulsively just running like on a gerbil on a wheel, and hoping that somehow or another, life will open up the patterns that are empowering you. Those are rigidity processes. We flip them, and it turns out it's different because you can in a single minute do rigidity and flexibility. So it's not like a trait. It's not like you're always, it doesn't go, and the heavens open up. You're not the Dalai Lama. Get over it. If you flip it, those same things around, learning to be more emotionally open, accepting and non-clinging, learning to be more cognitively flexible, noticing your thoughts with a little bit of distance and being able to think a lot of them, but not necessarily have to sort through them in a way that you only think one way. You think many ways. Coming into the present in a way that's flexible, fluid, and voluntary, attending to what's of importance to you from a more spiritual sense of self, the part of you that connects you in consciousness to others. Just look at somebody's eyes that you love, that little moment. That's what I'm talking about. Take that part of you and then focus on what brings meaning and purpose intrinsically to your life. What am I talking about? I'm talking about those moments when you do things and you feel this is connected, vital. This is what I want. This is what I want to be about. And then build habits around that. Final two things, extend all of that to your relationships. And by the way, take care of your body. The end. If people get what I just said, because I gave you the 6 inflexibility ones, the 6 flexibility ones, and then reminded you that you're a social creature, extend that to your relationships. We can talk about that. And by the way, you're a physical creature. Don't be treating your body like shit. Here's what we did. We looked at every single study ever done in the history of the world that changes human mental functioning in areas that we call mental distress, mental illness, etc. Everyone that's ever been done in the history of the world that detected how change happened using proper statistics. It took us 3 years to look at 55,000 studies twice. 50 people helped score them. Then we only looked at the ones that had been replicated, how it worked, because lots of evidence that this was done as an afterthought. So we wanted at least 2 studies showing whatever you're talking about. What I just told you, learn how to be more open, aware, and actively engaged in life, and extend that to your relationships, take care of your body, accounts for all of it.
100%.
Yeah, if you give me a mother's eye, kind of a little bit of flexibility. If you're tight and you say, Steve, you big liar, if it really has to link to psychological flexibility, it has to but then you allow me extending it to relationships and taking care of your body. If you just do that, but you're tight and you're kind of critical, you get into right around 70%. If it's just psychological flexibility, period, end of story, or it's synonyms, it's 55%. But relationships matter and your body matters, so you got to take care of those. So you get up. But then you get a little bit more flexible and you say something like, okay, reappraisal is thinking different things. It's not the same as just noticing your thoughts. Dude, the way reappraisal works is you think more flexibly. Of course, you still have goofy thoughts. They're not going to leave your brain. There's no delete button in the brain. As the joke goes, short of a frontal lobotomy or a bottle in front of me. I mean, there's no healthy way to delete your nervous system. Get over it. If you've ever thought something weird, it's kind of rumbling in the basement. And so, and even if you forgot it, you can learn it again more quickly. So we're not talking about subtracting, get rid of things with reappraisal. We're talking about thinking more flexibly. So if you let me just have a conversation, the people who have their terms, I bet you I can win that argument every time. And when I'm finished, it accounts for all of it. So if you're not a geek scientist and you're just a normal person listening, listen to the next long sentence. Learn how to be more open, aware, and actively engaged in a life worth living. Extend that to your relationships and take care of your body. The end. Now, you don't have to call it ACT. Call it anything. I don't give a F. But put it in your life. And you look around and you're going to see that's what we've been doing right along in our wisdom traditions, our best of our clinical traditions, our self-help traditions, at their best, in 1,000 different ways of expressing those ideas. That's cool. I'm not trying to be grabby. Just talk about it your own way. But learn to do those things.
And there's so many good exercises in ACT for doing these things. I mean, there's this, I think this central concept of, okay, we don't need to be so identified with our thoughts. There's a choice there. We can notice the thoughts and we don't have to take them that seriously. We can disconnect. There's a decision point of, oh, do I want to pay attention to that or not? And there are a bunch of different exercises in ACT that are simple and help us do that. Can you describe some of those?
Yeah. Okay. So for example, that little thing of noticing your thoughts, taken metaphorically, and this actually is an example. Take a sheet of paper, write down a thought that hooks you a lot. Now put it in front of your face. So you can still read what you wrote down, but you can't see anything else. That's where often we start. Now take that same sheet of paper and move it off to about 12 inches off to the side. See, you can look there, it's still there. But you can see a whole lot of other things, can't you? Okay, what would it take to do that? Well, one thing, you just started to learn to do that by what you just did. The next time the thought is up on you, just have a little bit of thing. Is that thought up on me like it's right here in front of my eyes, in front of my face? Maybe I could put it over here. You can do that. How? Well, here's an example. Sing the thought. Well, here's another example. Say it in the voice of Donald Duck or your least favorite politician. Here's another example. Take that thought, distill it down to a single word or two if you can't get it to one. Now say that word out loud pretty fast, about once per second for 30 seconds. Take that thought, distill it down to a word, and I'll see if you can take the same letters and create another word. And the next time you think that thought, remember that word too. Bad, spelled backwards, is dab. I'm feeling dab today. Now, if you think I'm ridiculing your mind, then do this last one. Take that thought, it's punching you, beating you about the head and ears. Yeah, that hurts. And that at worst puts you into that fetal position. Remember how young you were when you first had a thought kind of like that. I bet you it was pretty darn young. Maybe not in those words, because it may have been kid words, but that space, I bet you it was there. Okay, take that kid of that age and remember what you look like and put that kid right in front of you. Picture the goofy shoes, the funny hair, the clothes your parents used to put you in, the whole 9 yards. And now take that thought that's beating you up and make the kid say it in her little girl or his little boy voice. What would you do if this happened and you met yourself at that age saying that? So it's not ridicule. You're not going to say to the kid, hey, you stupid kid. No, you're not going to do that. You're probably going to hug the kid or say it's okay. Or there's more to you than that. Or you'll say something loving. But you'll get in front of the person in front of the mirror brushing your teeth and you'll rip them out of. I won't finish that sentence. You know what I'm going to say. The neurobiology of this, this narrative sense of self, the stories you tell that often are how great and grand or how low and low, are so much of a parasite on this 500 to 1,000 times more ancient organ that it actually eliminates your ability even to sense what's in your environment. How do we know that? Psychedelic assisted therapy works by oceanic awareness, sense of well-being, but when it works, I'm not saying run out and do psychedelics, please. I'm an old hippie. I know that train wreck. Do not do this without guidance. But you look. Why? Because you can put people in the imager and you can look and you can see that the narrative self is actively filtering out sensory motor information, so much so that you don't even know where you are. You could have loving people around you and feel like you're the most lonely person on the planet. And when you open up that narrative self, it affects these midbrain functions, and now suddenly love is everywhere. You start talking like a freaking hippie or monk. So look, we're riding the back of a tiger that we created as a species, and it's hard to be whole and free as a human being because we've got a problem-solving organ that gives us the ability to sit here on Riverside and talk to somebody thousands of miles away, on the one hand. On the other hand, be miserable in the midst of plenty.
And what are the role and the importance of identifying core values or identifying your greater why? Will you speak a little bit to values?
Yeah, values are these chosen qualities of being and doing. It's the juice. It's what brings tears to your eyes. It's so close. It's part of why we cry at weddings, or why you cry at a birth, or why if I ask you what is really, really important to you, you pause. And if you answer the question fully and honestly, tears come to your eyes. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, oh, I want to be famous, or, oh, please, tears don't come to your eyes, dude. We're talking about something that is so much your living your legacy that it's in your guts, And how do you know it? You feel lifted up when you're in touch with it. You look around, you see your heroes, they manifest it. And you at your worst, when you're really struggling, if you flip it over, why that's so painful is you don't get to be about this. So you know it. Your brain even knows it when you pull the self story out. Now, when you talk about discovering your values, listing your values, etc., you can get pretty mindy about it. You get pretty much into, just listing virtues or something. You got to get it in a more juicy way, which is why being more open cognitively, emotionally, and in the present is so critical. Because I would just want to say this, this, you hurt where you care. That's why you can flip over that betrayal that happened. I bet you were betrayed in love. I bet you somebody didn't want you anymore or lied to you. Flip it over. Why did that bring tears? Because you wanted intimacy and honesty and connection. Yeah? You won't allow yourself to know that until you're open to the possible pain of that. Because even if you have God's gift to a loving relationship, that person could die, and before you. So you won't allow yourself to be in the presence of joy, connection, and the things you yearn for until you know that life is finite, love and loss is one thing, not two, and that a values-based journey is not happy, happy, joy, joy, rim and stimpke rictus. It's more like the bittersweet quality of tears coming to your eyes, watching a wedding or a birth, or just answering the question, what do you really want in your life? What do you really want to be about?
Yeah, I mean, the duality of it reminds me so much of being a parent. I've got 3 young kids, and what I've realized about being a parent is you just crank up the vulnerability to this really crazy degree. I mean, whatever the worst thing that could have happened to me pre-kids, I get, paralysis or some terminal diagnosis or whatever it is. It's nothing compared to the worst thing that could happen to me now, which is really the worst thing that could happen to one of my kids. I would 100 out of 100 times take the worst case scenario pre-kids with a smile on my face when given the choice between that and some worst case scenario for one of the children. And so in order to get the joy and the richness and the grind, kids can be a grind too. It's not all amazing, but there are some really high moments. you got to roll the dice on the risk. I mean, you've got to have these little creatures out in the world, and they're just your little walking, talking vulnerabilities.
Well, and it sounds like your kids are still a little young, and you're talking to a guy who has kids from age 54 to 18, space so that I will have children in the home for 55 years when little Stevie goes to college, which he will in 3 months. When my wife, when we were courting, and she said she didn't want kids, and I'm thinking that's good because I'm damn old, and I'm 15 years older than her, and I'm 75 years old now. And then she just comes and says, actually, I do want kids, and I see you with your kids, and you're so good with your kids. And I go, oh, God. I go out for a walk. I come back. I get eye to eye with her, and I say, okay, but I just want to say one thing. We're going to do it, and you will never have felt so vulnerable in your life, and it will never go away. And so, I woke up this morning thinking about my soon to be 55-year-old in December. So, it will never go away, Brent.
Yeah, it's scary. And I realized I've got a 6-month-old, so they are young. On the third, I'm like, I'm just multiplying this vulnerability. It just keeps going. Now there's 3 of them.
Everybody knows this, even if you don't have kids. And, when you do have kids, you enter into a different world where you understand what Brent and I are talking about. If you don't, you may not, but you know something about things like the vulnerability that comes when you've been betrayed in love and you say yes again to another person in a really open and loving way. You're now going to be hurt. And the mind, the last time you were hurt and lied to, said, I will never be so vulnerable again. Well, that means you'll never be in love again. Really? Is it worth that? Now, little Stevie is going to go to Purdue. We're going to drive him there. And on August 12th, he's in his little class to how to get ready for the 19th when he's in classes, and he's 2,000 miles away. And I might not see him, but like once or twice a year. And I go, wow, does that hurt? Yes. Is that joyous? Yes. He got admitted to Purdue. It has the perfect major for him. Perfect. We went and visited. It's an awesome school, and the major is awesome, and the teachers are great, and he really wants to be there. And he turned out offers from amazing schools to pick this one. And yeah, he's probably happy that they have a good basketball team. I admit that. But will a big smile be on our face when, yeah, and will we hold ourselves and cry, my wife and I? Yeah, we will. We will. That's what's coming, Brent. Even if you never have kids and stuff, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something that's as close to you as, the next moment of meaning in your life. That's how close it is.
Yeah, you can't, if you want to be in love, you can't get the love and all the positive without the vulnerability and the risk of heartbreak. It just doesn't work that way.
One thing, not two. That's the Oreo cookie. You're reaching for it, dude.
And so much of what you're saying in this conversation, I think, has reminded me of psychedelics more than I expected. We don't need to get into a whole thing of psychedelics or not. I mean, maybe we go there, but there is this meditation can get you there. There's breathing exercises that can get you there. Psychedelics I did psychedelics recreationally young, and I don't recommend that either, but I've done some guided and it's been helpful for me. And we've done podcasts about all the pros and cons. Go listen to those if that's something you're considering. But there is this space that a few of these different things that can get you into, which is not this thinking, problem solving space that's very difficult to describe. I had a friend who asked me about one of the psychedelics experiences. Like, it's not really a thing I can describe. It's hard to describe, but what I hear you saying about ACT and the principles of ACT is it's finding that, maybe spiritual space is the wrong word, but not directionally incorrect. And so how would you describe this space and getting into this space? Or maybe I'm totally off base.
Well, no, you're not. You're right in it. But we are dealing with a problem here, which is that there's 4 of us here now, Brent, you, me, your mind, and mine, and they're listening. And they're wanting to figure it out, and they're going to put words atop it. And we're talking about things, as you say, that go beyond words. That part of you doesn't get that. It'll never get that. It's the problem-solving, word-generating engine. It gives you, podcasts and speaking 1,000 miles away. It gives you that. But it also gives you, in the midst of plenty, less disease, less hunger, amazing things. More suffering in the world now, arguably, than ever. I mean, our suicide rates among our kids just keep going up and up and up. Come on, it's like mocking us almost, because you're getting all the goodies and you're still getting the baddies because you don't have modern minds for the modern world. So I don't want to turn this into something spooky and big and out there, because it's like it'll take 6 months or a year versus 20 years. How about if we just take the tiny, tiny, tiny little things that take you more in that direction? Remembering, by the way, if you ask the question right, something like 98% of the human population knows something about moments of extraordinary oneness and connections across time, place, and person. Whether it happened in the looking in their lover's eyes, or their kids, or their dogs, or a moment of peace, or connection, or appreciating beauty, or looking at the sunset, or doing a nature walk, or sitting in meditation, or being in church, or it's as common as dirt. People have a spiritual side to them. But if you make it spooky and out there, when you wrap it in all the different forms, it comes in, it gets harder. So here's a tiny, tiny, tiny little exercise you could do. If I were to say it out loud in a meditative way, it would take me about 8 minutes. So I'll do it just descriptively. And I'll ask you to do this yourself at home. Sit with something that is really painful, eyes closed. Put it in front of you, metaphorically. Pull it out, put it in front of you. There's a squirmy, wormy ball of feelings, thoughts, memories, behavioral predispositions, etc. Now leave your body sitting there and look back at yourself metaphorically. You know how to do this, just like the little light that came out of Harry Potter. Just a cheap B movie. Take your consciousness out inside yourself, spin around, look at yourself. Remember, you can't see it from the outside, but there's that ball. And then just don't answer the question, but just ask this question. How do I feel towards myself? Am I a good person? Do I belong here? Am I whole? Am I valid? Do I like myself? Do I love myself? Don't answer. Just sit inside. How do I relate to this creature called me? Knowing there's this thing. You can't see it from the outside. Now, go to the side of the room mentally. If you're actually doing this physically, you can leave yourself in the chair mentally and literally walk to the other side of the room. Spin around, look back, ask yourself the same questions, but remember there's this thing in front of you, but do it slowly. I'm describing it fast because we're doing a podcast. When you're done with that, just close your eyes and imagine this is all a memory. You're actually remembering from a distant future when life has opened up spectacularly well, and you're a lot wiser about this time when you did a goofy exercise and you're standing by the side of the room looking back at yourself from the outside, but knowing that you're suffering on the inside, and asking questions like, do you belong here? And are you valid? And do I like you? And do I love you? And here's my challenge to you, distant future. If you could cheat and pass a note back across the ages, what would you want to tell to yourself 10 years ago or long ago when you were suffering with that thing that you can't see from the outside, but is there on the inside? And write yourself a note. It can only be one sentence. If you can get it down to a few words, even better. Then when you're done with that, you can open your eyes, write your note, walk over from where you were, look at that mentally or physically. You can do it physically. At that chair, spin around, sit down, take that thing and put it back inside you, that squirmy, weary ball, and read the note, the end. When I've done this, and I've done it with thousands of people, the notes will almost bring tears to your eyes, and they all say what you and I have been talking about, Brent. They all say things like you would say to that suffering you if you met yourself as a young kid, saying the kind of stuff that will make you treat yourself like dirt when you're brushing your teeth in the morning. So why would you do that? Because spirituality, this deeper sense of self, I think is just consciousness and awareness. And somewhere in there around age 4, when we were getting our language going and we're learning how to sort of take perspective, we step out of ourselves and we take perspective on ourselves. And there's a snap infantile amnesia shows up. You no longer really even remember the songs you were singing when you were 3 years old. And you're now part of the human community in a different way. And we call it the age of reason, because now you're riding the tiger. Now you can use that problem solving consciously, deliberately, and you know this other sense of self. But here's the way our spirituality, what it does is it connects us to the oneness, because there's a split that happens when you step out of yourself and look back at yourself. Ironically, the exercise I just did that. When you integrate it all, you're here now, whole, free. What do you want to do? That's a spiritual message. Go to church and they'll say things like that. And I'm not, advocating for going to church if you're not into doing it through that way. I'm just saying the kinds of things we're into right now, Brent, matter. And there is a place for you to find this more spiritual sense of self that will allow you to be whole and free.
And it doesn't take some extreme act. I think I also hear you saying it doesn't. Oh, I got to go find the shaman somewhere and do something extreme.
You don't have to be a shaman. You don't have to go to the Brazilian rainforest. You don't have to chant for ages. You don't have to be silent for days. Although those are great ways in. I mean, fine, great, do it. Or don't. If you're not going to do it and you don't have time or whatever, at least in your own way, find this core of you that in a classic act metaphor is more like a chessboard holding all the pieces that are running around and playing the game. And you forget that you're the board and not the pieces. And in fact, the only part of you that's in touch with it all is the board. You're the context of this big game you're playing inside your head with your thoughts and feelings and all that. And you showed up when that splitting happens. It was built right into human consciousness. Consciousness itself is spiritual. You don't have to talk about it in a theistic way if you don't want to, but don't be dumb about it when you already know it's there. The part of you that says, no, it's not, because no, is the very part of you that's at that peace level that we need to learn how to hold with equanimity. Okay, let your brain chatter at you, but don't let it harness your brain system so much that you don't even know where you are. You don't know who you are, and you don't know that there's love all around you. There's contributions you can make all around you. Loneliness is what you're going to earn by that kind of cynicism.
And what do you think? It reminds me of, I did this thing called the Hoffman process maybe a decade ago, which feels like an extreme. It's for those who aren't aware, it's 7 or 8 days. And I think they do it in a few places. I did it in Northern California, but there is a lot of this separating, kind of looking at yourself from the third person, having compassion for yourself, having compassion for the person you were as a child, for your parents as a whole parent component. Are you familiar with a process like that? Do you have a perspective on it?
I'm not specifically, but here's what I've done just on my own. I have a little thing called Just Like Act. It's full. It's about 6 inches wide. There's no more room to stuff up in there. Well, now you just put it on your computer, but it's not surprising at all to hear what you're saying is in this. We have 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 ways, and you can create your own. And I honor that. I bow in the direction, but I will say, also, let's put science to it. And let's ask science 2 questions. 1, does this work? 2, how? If you know those 2 things, it's safe. Because there are goofy things. There are cults. There are people who abuse and nominate themselves. And, one of the things I decided early on as a hippy-dippy guy, and when I sort of found this at the bottom of my suffering and decided to put it in the world, one reason why it took 20 years is I tried to build it into a way that gurus need not apply, including me. No effing gurus. You want to abuse processes like this, do it that way. And, I was on a commune back in the day with a religious guy, supposedly a disciple of Kriyananda. You can be at 2 places at once, an old hippy-dippy idea. Who it ended up was nailing every female in the camp. The first Zen talk I ever went to was Joshu Sasaki Roshi, who brought a really important wing of Zen into the US of A. And I saw him about 6 months after his boat landed in LA. Go look him up. He was trying to nail female acolytes at 100 years old. So no gurus. You can't trust them. But be on a journey that's about this wiser, more spiritual part of you that doesn't have edges and knows something about transcendence, enough that you can be whole and free, even despite the fact that you've done things that are creepy, you've done things that need forgiveness, you've done things that have abused your body or the relationships of people around you. Find a way where you can let go and be emotionally and cognitively open in the present, focused on what's important and matters, extending that to your relationships and your body. And that part of you, the biggest, is this more spiritual sense of self, if you don't take it too seriously. So I kind of like demystifying it. And yeah, if you have a big mystical experience, and if you're Eckhart Tolle, but they all have the same content: oceanic awareness, connection to quantum, time, place, and person. Every mystic that you can name who's created a religion or become a whole thing, or if you dig down to their experience, you're going to find it. And if you want mine, go watch my TED Talk.
Yeah. So on that note, as we're running out of time, is how do we find you? You know, where do we go if we want more information on ACT? Where can we go if we want to, learn more about you?
Easy peasy. Just remember my name, www.stephenchayes.com. Stephen with a V, middle initial C for Charlie, my dad's name. StephenChayes.com, and click on yes, please send it to me. You're on my list. I'll send you, a monthly newsletter, and I don't spam people, and you can one-click opt out if it's ever creepy and you don't like. Or put in psychological flexibility or acceptance and commitment therapy or acceptance and commitment training and do a Google search. And avoid the spammers and stuff. There's weird stuff. They're actually creating artificial people who write artificial books by skimming the internet and then try to sell it. And Amazon doesn't care because they still make their money. So make sure that you got real people who really know about the work. And if that's not enough, here's an easy one. The single most downloaded book at the World Health Organization website is called Doing What Matters in Times of Stress. It's free. It's in 28 different languages. You can learn about it. But if you get on my list, I'll share a whole bunch of cool and exciting things that are going on. And I'd love to be in contact with you.
Well, Dr. Steve Hayes, thank you so much, first and foremost, for your work. I think it's been, as I had said at the beginning, it's been hugely impactful for me. And I know just countless others. And so it's just an incredible, bonfire from the match that you lit. And then I wish you the best on, your son going to Purdue, being a Boilermaker. You've got the summer to try to soak him up. I'm sure an 18-year-old boy just wants to do nothing but hang out with, mom and dad this summer. But, you get what you can.
Not. Just getting him to fill out the forms at Purdue is a challenge, but he's a lovely guy who's getting his second black belt in the next month. And, really, he'll do fine at Purdue. I have faith. And it's an exciting time for us. And thank you so much for the opportunity to reach out to people who are just listening. You're part of the bonfire, my friend. So thank you.
Thank you so much. The Most Days Show is recorded in Boulder, Colorado, produced by Patrick Adino, music by Patrick Lee, and hosted by yours truly, Brent Franson, founder and CEO of Most Days.